What happens when the king of late-night comedy suddenly finds himself dethroned? This is the story of one November evening that changed everything. When Stephen Colbert thought he was delivering just another Trump roast, only to discover he'd walked into a trap that would end his career forever. It started like any other Tuesday night at CBS Studios in Manhattan. The Late Show audience buzzed with anticipation, phones out, ready to capture Colbert's latest takedown of the 47th president. Under the bright studio lights, Stephen Colbert strutted to his desk with that trademark smirk audiences had come to expect. "Good evening, everyone," he announced, adjusting his tie with theatrical flair. "Tonight, our favorite commander-in-chief has really outdone himself." The cameras caught his sneer perfectly as he leaned forward conspiratorially. Obese, corrupt, and clearly unfit to lead. But hey, at least he's consistent in his incompetence. The studio erupted. Applause thundered through the theater as cameras panned across the cheering crowd, capturing every laugh, every knowing nod, every phone recording the moment. This was peak Colbert, sharp, merciless, and completely confident in his untouchable position as America's premier Trump tormentor. But 6 blocks away, in a secure room at Trump Tower, something unprecedented was about to unfold. Donald Trump sat motionless in his leather chair, the television's glow reflecting off his unusually calm features. For 18 months, Colbert's nightly attacks had intensified beyond typical political satire. Failed businessman, danger to democracy, unfit father. The insults had grown personal, vicious, relentless. His advisors had urged restraint countless times. "Sir, engaging will only give him more material," his press secretary had pleaded just hours earlier. Even Barron had whispered after one particularly brutal segment, "Just ignore him, Dad. He's not worth it." But tonight was different. Tonight, Trump had received a phone call that changed everything. "Mr. President," his chief of staff had said, voice tight with controlled excitement, "you need to see these documents, now." Trump studied the papers spread before him. Bank records, email chains, encrypted communications, and for the first time in months, he smiled. Not the practiced smile of campaign rallies, but something quieter, more dangerous. He picked up his phone with deliberate precision. "Get me a direct line to CBS headquarters," he said softly, "and prepare the White House broadcast studio. We're going live in 20 minutes." Back at CBS, Colbert was hitting his stride, working through his prepared material with the timing of a seasoned performer. But something in his earpiece made him pause mid-sentence. His producer's voice cut through the laughter. "Stephen, we're getting reports that Trump is about to go live from the White House. Something big is happening." Colbert's confident expression flickered for just a moment before he recovered. "Well, folks, looks like our thin-skinned president wants to interrupt our show with another Twitter tantrum. How presidential." The audience laughed, but it sounded forced now, nervous energy replacing the earlier confidence. Across the nation, emergency alerts began pinging on phones. Cable networks interrupted regular programming. Social media feeds exploded with speculation. And then, at exactly 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time, every major network cut to the same feed. President Trump standing behind the resolute desk, looking directly into the camera with an expression nobody had seen before. "Good evening, my fellow Americans," he began, his voice measured and tinged with quiet resolve. "I wasn't planning to address the nation tonight, but recent events have forced my hand. After months of deliberation, I believe you deserve to know the truth about what's been happening behind the scenes of America's most popular late-night show." In the CBS control room, chaos erupted. Producers scrambled between monitors, phones rang incessantly, and the network's legal team was hastily patched in via conference call. On stage, Colbert's house band had stopped playing entirely, their instruments hanging silent as everyone, audience included, stared at the screen showing Trump's address. "For the past 18 months," Trump continued, "Stephen Colbert has used his platform to launch increasingly personal attacks against me and my family. While I believe in free speech and the right to criticize public officials, what I'm about to show you goes far beyond comedy or legitimate political commentary." He held up a thick manila folder, its contents clearly visible to the cameras. "These are financial records obtained through legal channels showing that Mr. Colbert and CBS have received significant undisclosed payments from political organizations whose sole purpose is to undermine the office of the presidency. The silence in the CBS studio was deafening. Colbert's trademark grin had vanished, replaced by something approaching panic as his producer frantically gestured from the wings. Trump opened the folder with theatrical precision. Bank transfers totaling $2.3 million over 6 months. Email communications detailing specific talking points to be incorporated into Mr. Colbert's monologues. And perhaps most disturbing, evidence that CBS executives knowingly participated in what can only be described as a coordinated disinformation campaign. He began reading from the documents, his voice never rising above its measured cadence. Quote, "The comedy angle gives us plausible deniability. We can say anything we want about Trump and his family as long as we get a laugh." End quote. This from a CBS executive to one of the funding organizations. Colbert tried desperately to regain control of the narrative. "Folks don't believe everything you see on TV," he said, but his voice cracked slightly. "This is just another attempt at manipulation from a desperate man." But viewers were already switching channels, drawn to the unprecedented spectacle of a sitting president systematically dismantling a major media figure with documentary evidence. Social media exploded with real-time reactions, trending hashtags, and rapidly spreading clips of Trump's most damning revelations. "There's more," Trump said, producing another set of documents. Internal CBS memos discussing the deliberate suppression of positive stories about the administration, the blacklisting of guests who might present alternative viewpoints, and, perhaps most troubling, the systematic harassment of CBS employees who expressed any reservation about the increasingly personal nature of these attacks. The camera zoomed in on the specific lines from the emails Trump was reading. "Make sure no one books anyone who might make Trump look good. The audience loves it when we go after his kids. Legal says we're protected as long as it's under the comedy umbrella." In the CBS control room, phones were ringing off their hooks. Advertisers demanding immediate answers. The network's CEO was already in an emergency car to the studio. And in the legal department, lawyers were frantically researching precedents for what appeared to be an unprecedented situation. 23 minutes after Trump began speaking, Colbert's show cut to an unscheduled commercial break. The audience sat in stunned silence as producers huddled in heated discussions just off stage. When the cameras rolled again, Colbert looked visibly shaken. "Look, everyone makes mistakes," he began, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. "Maybe some of my jokes went too far. Maybe the research wasn't as thorough as it should have been. But this is America, and comedy has always pushed boundaries." But by then, it was too late. Trump's methodical presentation had been shared millions of times across social platforms. News organizations were scrambling to verify the documents. And perhaps most damaging of all, former CBS employees were already coming forward with their own stories of pressure to participate in what they described as a systematic campaign of character assassination. The show limped to its conclusion with a deflated Colbert going through the motions of his standard closing. As the cameras powered down and the audience filed out in uncomfortable silence, a CBS executive approached the stage with a manila envelope. Colbert opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single page. "Contract termination, effective immediately." Within hours, number Colbert Exposed was trending worldwide. Major sponsors announced they were reviewing their relationship with the show. Streaming platforms began removing old episodes pending content review. And perhaps most devastating of all, late-night comedy colleagues who had once defended Colbert's right to push boundaries began distancing themselves from what increasingly looked like coordinated political harassment rather than legitimate satire. Trump's final appearance that night was brief but powerful, standing not behind the presidential podium, but in the White House residence, flanked by photos of his family. He spoke directly to the camera in a tone America had rarely heard from him. "I want to be clear about something," he said, his voice softer now, almost paternal. "This was never about protecting myself from criticism. Presidents are fair game. It comes with the job. But when comedy becomes cruelty, when entertainment becomes propaganda, when a platform becomes a weapon, that's when someone has to stand up and say, enough." Images flashed on screen. Melania turning away from cameras after particularly brutal segments. Barron looking uncomfortable at public events. Family members who had never sought the spotlight being dragged into vicious punchlines night after night. "I forgive Stephen Colbert," Trump continued, his voice steady but emotional. "Forgiveness is what we do in America. But forgiveness doesn't erase the damage done, and it doesn't prevent us from demanding better from our media institutions." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media filled with messages of support from Americans who felt the line between comedy and cruelty had been crossed. Veterans organizations released statements about the impact of constant ridicule on military families. Even some Democrats began questioning whether the tactics had gone too far. By morning, it was over. CBS announced a temporary hiatus for The Late Show. Major advertisers had officially withdrawn support, and Colbert himself had disappeared from public view entirely, his representatives declining all comment. 3 days later, in a small segment that barely made the news, Trump was spotted at Walter Reed Medical Center, quietly visiting wounded veterans. No cameras, no publicity team, no political messaging. Just a president spending time with service members who had sacrificed for their country. A photo emerged on social media. Trump kneeling beside a young Marine's hospital bed, listening intently as the soldier spoke. The contrast with the nightly ridicule couldn't have been more stark, and it spread organically across platforms with the simple caption, "This is leadership." The aftermath was swift and decisive. No major network would consider hiring Colbert. His production company lost its office lease. Former colleagues publicly distanced themselves from what had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of weaponizing comedy for political purposes. In his only public statement, released through his lawyer, Colbert wrote, "I let my personal feelings override my professional judgment. I hurt people who didn't deserve it, and I betrayed the trust of my audience. For that, I am truly sorry." But by then, the conversation had moved beyond one comedian's fall from grace. Media ethicists began discussing new guidelines for political satire. Journalism schools started examining the case as a watershed moment in the relationship between entertainment and news. And across America, families began having difficult conversations about the difference between holding leaders accountable and participating in systematic dehumanization. 6 months later, Trump stood before a packed audience at the Kennedy Center, receiving an award for his administration's support of veterans programs. In his acceptance speech, he made no mention of Colbert or the events that had brought them together. Instead, he spoke about forgiveness, about moving forward, and about the responsibility that comes with any platform, whether political or comedic. "We all have the power to build up or tear down," he said, looking out at an audience that included former critics who had gained new respect for his restraint during the crisis. "The choice we make defines not just our character, but our country's character." That night, in a small apartment across town, Stephen Colbert watched the ceremony alone. The man who had once commanded audiences of millions sat in silence, finally understanding the difference between accountability and cruelty, between legitimate criticism and personal destruction. The story became more than just a cautionary tale about media overreach. It became a reminder that in America, truth has a way of surfacing, consequences have a way of finding their mark, and sometimes the most powerful response to systematic cruelty is not more cruelty, but simply the quiet dignity of refusing to participate in the destruction of human decency. And in living rooms across the nation, families who had grown tired of the constant anger, the endless divisions, and the weaponization of entertainment found themselves grateful for a leader who had chosen to end the cycle rather than perpetuate it. What you just witnessed wasn't just the end of one comedian's career. It was a masterclass in strategic communication and the power of documented truth over manufactured narratives. In 24 hours, we watched the complete dismantling of a media empire built on coordinated attacks disguised as comedy. This story reveals something profound about our media landscape: the difference between legitimate criticism and systematic character assassination. It shows us that accountability can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most powerful response to relentless attacks is not more attacks, but simply the quiet presentation of truth. The documents Trump revealed that night didn't just end Colbert's career. They changed how America thinks about the relationship between entertainment and propaganda. They reminded us that behind every joke, every monologue, every harmless roast, There might be a coordinated strategy funded by special interests. If stories like this fascinate you, moments where truth breaks through manufactured narratives, where underdogs fight back against systematic campaigns, where justice arrives when least expected, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell because we're diving deep into the stories mainstream media won't tell you. The moments that change everything, the documents that expose corruption, the strategic moves that turn the tables on the seemingly untouchable. We've got more incredible stories of media manipulation exposed, political masterstrokes that change history, and the quiet moments when truth finally defeats propaganda. Your subscription helps us continue investigating and sharing these crucial stories. What did you think of Trump's strategy? Was this justified exposure of corruption, or did he go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and it might spark our next deep investigation. Subscribe now and become part of our community that believes truth is more powerful than any coordinated attack. Because in a world full of manufactured narratives, we're here to find the real story. And trust me, you won't want to miss what we're uncovering next.